Hello again, it's Amy with Just a Little Ink, and I'm here to share with you a simple card design. It's one actually that I received in a swap recently from one of my team members, each using different colors and different embossing folders, and yet all very similar in look. And I thought, what a great inspiration, and so it inspired me to come up with this set of cards, all using images from the Timeless Tropical stamp set. So I'm going to offer to anyone who chooses to order it, it's out right now out of our Occasions catalog. If you order the bundle, the Timeless Tropical bundle, and use the host code throughout the month of May, I will send you a card kit so you can make 3 of these cards as well. And so I'm going to show you how to make the card with the leaves. All of them are very similar. They use the same layout. You don't need to write down all the dimensions. I have all of these on my blog, justalittle.ink.com. But for each card, you need a half a sheet of cardstock, 5.5 by 8.5. You need a layer piece at 5 inches by 3 3/4. You need 2 pieces of basic black. One that is 5 1/8 by 3 7/8 inches. Another piece that is 2 5/8 by 3 5/8. Then you need a couple pieces of Whisper White cardstock, one for the inside, 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, a small piece 2.5 by 3 1/2 inches, and you also need a piece of Vellum cardstock, which is also cut at 2.5 inches by 3 1/2 inches. And so let's get started. In every instance, I always score my cards using my score tool. And so I'm going to, my Simply Scored, I'm going to go ahead and fold it along that score line. Use my bone folder to get a nice crisp edge. I've already run my layer piece through the scripty embossing folder. It gives nice detailed script. You could use any of these any of the folders we have and get different looks. Put some adhesive on the back. If you're a fan of our snail adhesive, you're going to want to get your, oh goodness, I cut one that's not small enough. You've never cut them wrong, correct? Well, now that we've trimmed everything to the correct measurements that I told you, I'm going to go ahead and layer my 2 pieces on. And I'm going to use our black Stampin' Dimensionals. They're something that came out new in our holiday catalog and are going to be staying around. And they're great because you don't see them when you pop up your layers. So I'm going to take the backs off. You notice how they just kind of hide. Put them aside. Layer my embossed piece on the front of my card. And then I'm going to show you how I stamped the leaves. I used my Stamparatus. It's my go-to, especially when I want multiple layers. So I'm going to show you how I laid it out. So I came down 1 inch. It's best when you can avoid this hinge piece. And I came in about 1/8 of an inch, which is about 1/2 of one of these squares on the grid. And then I'm going to take my magnet and lay it down. I laid my leaf in the center with my hinge 1 over. So you notice it's not all the way on the end. It's right 1 spot over. And I'm going to use Tuxedo ink. So my Memento Tuxedo black ink. And I've already made myself one in my uninked Stampin' Spot because it's just a great size to be using with the Stamparatus. I'm going to bring it down, stamp it, and then I can move it back over to the original mark on the hinge, ink it again, come down, and then I'm going to go 2 over. Again, ink it up, get myself in the screen here. And come down 1 more time. And I get 3 leaves spaced pretty close to centered on the front of this one. I'm going to then move my plate And I can put it on the side, which is another wonderful thing about the Stamparatus. I'm going to bring it down, my vellum piece, and I'm going to put it an inch down, but I'm going to put it all the way against the edge. Well, as long as I don't move it when I move my magnet around. These are very strong magnets, which is why I have a little piece of washi tape on there. To stamp onto my vellum, I'm going to use StazOn ink because it will not smear and it'll have a better adhesion to the front of the card. So I'm going to stamp it with StazOn ink. I'm going to come down, give a nice firm pressure. See, you notice that it didn't ink all the way here, so it needs a little more pressure on this end. So I'm going to push a little harder on the hinge end. I may have to ink it a little again. Sometimes I stand up when I'm doing this to make sure I get enough inking. Almost got it. Let's try one more time. The good news is I get a lot of tries, as long as nothing shifts. Well, and it sort of did. Now you kind of get how this works. Sometimes it's all great and sometimes not so much. To avoid that hinge, I'm going to use the grid to line it up an inch down and an inch over. Lay down my magnet. Sometimes it's hard to know how much of that magnet to let go. They are so tight. There we go. Make sure I'm lined up. Again, I'm going to use my StazOn ink because it doesn't smear when I stamp onto my vellum. Open it up. Perfect. I'll pull this out and I can set my Stamparatus aside. Gives just a second or two for that to dry. And while it does, I can be coloring with my Stampin' Blends on my leaves. And I'm only going to do the first one and then I have one I already did. So I take my dark. I tend to go dark to light. So I'm going to come against the veins with the dark. And I do one at a time, just so I don't have it drying. And when you want to use the two colors, you get a nice blend. And so then I'm going to use the light, and I'm going to just start coming in, and I'm going to swirl my light, come up into each of my points of my leaf. Hopefully you aren't hearing the trash. I keep trying to film. And I don't know how many trash trucks we have coming through this morning, but there are a few too many. So then, once I get into all the little points, then I might use the brush tip, which I find is just a better option. It gives, if you have more coverage, you can come in. And so you'll notice how then it starts to blend out all of those darker veins that I drew. Come across, and you can keep going as many times as you want. If you get outside the lines, you can use the color lifter, which pushes that color back in. And by the magic of television, as they say, I have one that's already done. And what I found is the best to hold this down. You can use glue dots put on top of each of these, but I just put a dot of the Tombow glue on each of the corners. It's just enough to hold it. Then I'm going to take my stamped piece of vellum and I'm going to lay it on top. Press just a few seconds. It'll hold it then, and then I can lay it onto this piece a basic black, and you notice I have on the back side, sometimes, you know, you need to use both sides of the paper. That was my case here. And you don't notice it all on the front, which is the beauty of paper. I tell people it's magic. It has two sides. As long as I don't grab here, I should be able to get it centered. Awesome. Line it up. Then I'm going to take my card that I had finished. I did not pop this up to keep it from being too thick. Lay it down on the center. And I can take my white piece, stick it in the inside so I have something that's nice and clear to be able to stamp or write a message. Come in the front. And voila! I hope that you have fun and that you will consider buying the Timeless Tropical Stamp Set. Have a